has written several important articles and books about the rain. And so with those few words, Chai Prudhisan, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that short introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by recounting Her Majesty Queen Rambhai Barni's biography. She faced several changes in her life situation, and in so doing, you will see how she readily adapted herself according to time, place, and situations, and resiliently came out unscathed. Born as Mom Chao, Her Serene Highness, one of as many as 48 or so offsprings of Prince Swasti. At the age of 2.5, she was placed into the care of Queen Pongsi, the major Queen Consort of King Chulalongkorn, her father's elder sister. Her upbringing in the Queen Anne's successive palaces laid the foundations of her character and personality that stood her in good stead for her life to come. These qualities were humility, services to the royal family and society, rather than self. Behavior appropriate to time and place and situations, perseverance, and courage when needed, for instance. That she was good-looking, unpretentious, in good health, and ever ready to partake in sports, most likely endeared her to Prince Prajadhipok, the youngest son of the Queen Aunt. They married when she was 14, and he 23. To marry girls off at that age could be seen as a wise tradition. She once said, "I have never lived a life of an adolescent. At 14, I had to behave like an adult. That is, to run the household of the prince, who was working full-time as an army officer." 2 years later, she accompanied him for 3 years in France for treatment to his health complaint. Then, as he attended that country's military staff college, she went to stay near him as he underwent field training in some rural areas of France, where facilities were rather Spartan. She learned the French language with a private tutor. This ability became useful on their subsequent visits abroad, surprisingly also when conversing in private with the Japanese emperor and empress. Soon after their return to Siam, the prince unexpectedly found himself the most likely heir to the throne. While their every move was constantly watched by the public, they humbly carried on as usual as much as possible. On King Vachiravud's last night, after having been congratulated by some members of the royal family, Princess Rambhai Barni moved to sit with Princess Poon Pisamai Diskun and confided with her with words to this effect: "This business of being the Blessed One is no fun." At age 21, she obviously understood that life meant both happiness and sorrows. King Prajadhipok, not having a son, Prince Prajadhipok reluctantly became King Rama VII. FK Exile, a British expat and a teacher at a Thai government school at that time, penned his impressions of the king and his consort as follows: "To me, there was something sad about him, but this was soon forgotten when he smiled. He had a charm of manner which was so typically Siamese. She was all that one most admired in a Siamese princess. Her smile was friendly and unaffected, and her inherent charm of manner so in keeping with her husband's." Princess Rambhai Barni, King Prajadhipok's only wife, became the Queen Consort at his coronation on the 25th of February 1926. From then on, she was constantly seen at the king's side everywhere, an almost unprecedented feature for a Queen Consort, and indeed court ladies. They went on official trips to almost all of the country's regions, except Isan, and then on 4 trips abroad to some 30 countries in as many as 4 continents. I will talk about the significance of these in the second part of this talk, in connection with her contributions to sustainable agriculture, education, social development, and gender equality. On the 24th of June 1932, while Their Majesties were on holiday at Klaikangwon Palace, Hua Hin, or Song Susi on Sea, a coup against the absolute monarchy was staged in Bangkok. Upon being notified how, in the first instance, Dr. Ted might tell us later, upon being notified, the king considered 3 options: to put up a fight, to flee abroad, or to return to Bangkok and become a constitutional monarch, as the coup group apparently asked him to do. Upon being asked for her preference, Queen Rambhai Barni very readily replied that the honorable thing to do was to go back to Bangkok, even in the face of possible danger to their lives. The king thus made his final decision. Recounting this episode in a letter to Prince Jumbala Jakapong, his nephew, the king lauded the queen for her courage and conviction. However, despite the king's efforts to usher in a smooth political transition, fighting broke out in October 1933 between provincial troops under the leadership of Prince Bavaradeh and government ones with attendant loss of lives. His offer to be a go-between having fell on deaf ears, the king decided to travel by a small boat at sea in the mid of night from Hua Hin to Songkhla, so as to ensure that the head of state was distant from the bloodletting conflict. Queen Rambhai Barni and her mother, Princess Apa Barni, were the only two females on the boat that took 2.5 days to reach Songkhla. The Queen once again showed her readiness to brave the possible dangers, natural or otherwise. When asked years later how she felt then, the Queen replied, "I did not think of anything. If we should die, we would die together." It appears that it was second nature to her to devote herself to king and country. Having stayed in Songkhla for 1.5 months, they returned to Bangkok just in time for the king to open the first half-elected, half-appointed parliament on the 10th of December 1933. Soon later, the royal couple left on their pre-planned official and private visits to 9 European countries. Having concluded these visits to the European countries, they took up temporary residence at Knoll House in Cranley, England. After some 5 months of negotiations with the government at home, on condition should the latter wish him to remain on the throne, King Prajadhipok sent his letter of abdication from there on March the 3rd, 1935. The king reverted to use his formal title of Prajadhipok, Prince of Sukhothai. It was yet another change to the Queen's life situation. Now, with only a few relatives and retainers, the royal couple moved from Knoll House to ever smaller residences, to Glenpamont in Virginia Water, Vane Court in Biddenden, Kent, and Compton House in Virginia Water. This for reasons of propriety and finance. Vane Court was their favorite. There they gardened and bicycled to shop at the 2 village shops alternately so as to be fair. The villagers referred to them as the squire and his lady, and invited them to open flower shows and gymkhanas. Yet, with the Thai government's enmity towards them, they found that most Thais in England feigned in non-recognition of them for a time. Then when World War II broke out in Europe, they were faced with the requisitioning of Vane Court for British territorial defence purposes. They rented Compton House and moved there, only to find danger from the Nazis' overhead bombs. They thus moved temporarily to Devon and North Wales for a time until the King's heart complaint necessitated their return to Compton House. On the 30th of May 1941, King Prajadhipok passed away of a sudden heart attack, while the Queen was on her way to collect the last belongings from Vane Court. Upon being fetched back to Compton House, the Queen, calm and collected, held back her tears until 3 days later, when the King's coffin was being transported for the cremation. That was simple, unceremonious, with no Buddhist ceremony. She kept some of his bones and ashes and continued to pay homage to her husband every day, twice a day, throughout her life. She was only 37 years old at the time. Queen Rambhai Barni lived on at Compton House, tended to her garden, played tennis and golf for exercise. When her male relatives and other Thais, as free Thais, joined the British Army to be enabled to help liberate their homeland from the Japanese occupation, the Queen gave them moral support. She herself went to London, risking the bombs, to help pack medical supplies at a medical facility, St. John's Ambulance Brigade, a sacrificial act for the sake of humanity. She also gave financial support to the education of her nieces and nephews. One niece, her favorite, was Mom Ratchawong Pimsai Amaratnan, a former honorary secretary of this society, the Siam Society. They shared their love of gardening. Even when the war was over, the Queen was adamant that she would not return to the homeland until the Thai government accorded King Prajadhipok full honor and dignity. Upon being invited by the Thai government to return with the relics of King Prajadhipok to be enshrined beside those of former kings, did she do so in May 1949. The 45-year-old Dowager Queen Rambhai Barni said upon her return as follows: "I do not want to be embroiled in affairs of state ever again. I desire to live a quiet life among my relatives, as any ordinary Thai woman would." With her changed status, she knew she should not be too much in the limelight. As it transpired, with the help of her relatives, she was to make significant contributions to the Crown and society. While seeking out a place to live in the countryside, she dutifully and gladly acted out her role as the most senior female royal personage by attending King Bhumipon's private wedding at Sapatum Palace. The audience on that occasion and the subsequent coronation of King Bhumipon and the attendant investiture of Queen Rambhai Barni as his Queen Consort, all at the Grand Palace. For this last ceremony, the first-hand experiences Queen Rambhai Barni had gained earlier were likely to have been very useful as supplements to the archival records, since no coronation had been held for some 24 years. In 1950, she traveled for a full day, for one full day on bumpy roads to Chanthaburi, and decided to buy a large plot of land that was unused in a rural area of Chanthaburi that is actually not far from the town. The sloping land was seen by her as amenable for irrigation and suitable for agricultural development. She resolutely engaged herself in agricultural and other pursuits, adapting what she had observed while traveling and living abroad for use there, so as to be of benefit to the local community. It is to these that I will now turn to in some detail, but not for too long, with reference to the main theme of this talk on her contributions. Throughout her travels abroad with King Prajadhipok, Queen Rambhai Barni was ever observant of all that she saw and experienced. She adapted many of the practices so observed for use while she lived in Chanthaburi. While abroad, their majesties were avidly interested in agricultural and animal husbandry projects. While abroad, their majesties were avidly interested in agricultural and animal husbandry projects in Vietnam, Italy, and Hungary, for instance. In Chanthaburi, with the assistance of her relatives and local farmhands, she began improving the unused land by a stream, by digging canals for irrigation, building thatch roof shelters, where she lived for a time, and turning the site into an orchard and farm. She named it simply Suan Baan Kaew. Electricity and running water would only come later, and so would some permanent buildings that had bricks and roof tiles fired on the premises, and timber from the teak concessions she had in Chiang Mai as construction materials. By the way, her residence, or Pratamnak, was designed by หม่อมเจ้าสมัยเฉลิมกฤษฎากร a famous architect, and it stands as a very modest blueprint that is unusual for ท่านสมัยเฉลิม. It is now run by Rambhai Barni Rajabhat University that keeps the residence, and it is opened for the public at all times, that is year-round. And there's a small exhibition there, and we've tried to keep the place as near as possible to when she lived there. What Queen Rambhai Barni pursued at Suan Baan Kaew was mixed farming, or เกษตรผสมผสาน that involved the growing of a variety of crops, upland rice, fruit trees and vegetables, as well as the keeping of chickens and ducks for their eggs, rather than cash crops. Thus, it could be said that she practiced what later came to be pursued by some rural communities and further developed by King Bhumibol into his sufficiency economy philosophy. She used a tractor to till the land, but kept cattle to keep the grass down and to provide veneer, as well as to draw carts, queen. So both traditional and modern agricultural methods were used as appropriate. Any good practices thereof were passed on to the locals and contributed to their better livelihood. Once the orchard and farm was up and running, the Queen turned her attention to the time-honored local craft of rush mat weaving. She set up a small mat weaving facility and brought in local women weavers. Noticing that the mats, hitherto used mainly for sitting and sleeping on, had colors that run. She asked her half-brother, who was a chemistry lecturer in Singapore, to make them color fast. Drawing from her observation of cloth weaving in the palace of her youth and the beautiful embroidery she saw and bought in Hungary, she learned to weave the mat material and introduced new designs in pastel shades. More than that, she innovatively turned the material into new household and consumer products such as baskets, ladies' handbags, and placemats and trays. They were marketed as the work of villagers. However, members of the public called them Chanthaburi mats and Queen Rambhai Barni's handbags, and such have been included in the National Inventory of Intangible Heritage last year, 2024. This clearly allows for the Queen's own practice of lifelong learning. Furthermore, she adapted for use at Suan Baan Kaew other practices she previously observed while abroad. These had to do with the education and welfare of children and workers. Next to the mat weaving center was a creche or nursery for the young children of the women weavers who took turns to look after them. When throngs of such children gathered as she went on her evening walks, she asked them how they were doing at school and taught them good manners. She reportedly expressed concern for their future when she was no more. She was attentive to the welfare and well-being of her farm workers. 3 meals a day were cooked for them, and a health clinic was set up with nurses from the provincial hospital working there on shifts. Any serious cases were sent to the hospital, and the Queen paid for the expenses incurred there. The Queen had earlier given to the then dilapidated hospital a well-equipped operating theatre building. This act of hers caught the attention of the government and led to the expansion and the renaming of it as Prajadhipok Hospital. that today serves as the medical hub of the eastern region, with not only Thai patients, but also some from neighboring countries, which I need not name. When in her advancing years, she returned to Bangkok, having lived at Suan Baan Kaew for 18 years. She sold it to the Ministry of Education for a moderate sum, so that it could become the site of a teacher's training college, now Rambhai Barni Rajabhat University. She said soon after leaving that she would always felt she was a Chanthaburi person, and that Suan Baan Kaew now would serve as the place for higher education of the local people, so that they would not have to go far from home for their higher education. I have left her contributions to gender equality last but not least. For the reason that the matter should be traced back to the time when King Prajadhipok ushered his wife into the prominent role at his side. This actually coincided with many policies the king put in train to promote the status and capabilities of women in Siam. In the field of education, he ordered the speeding up of the provision of free primary education. And this was achieved in nearly 80% of the country's sub-districts within his reign. There were girl, boy, and co-educational schools. Also, when the then only university, Chulalongkorn, was able to offer degree-level programs, women were admitted to them simultaneously with men. This opened up opportunities for women to enter the professions as doctors, nurses, lawyers, teachers, and journalists, for instance. When changes to the family law was being considered, his cabinet decided not yet to prohibit men from having more than one wife. The king allowed the majority decision to hold, even if he wished otherwise. He added a rejoinder that laws could not always change social customs by fiat. It was reported by the American press in 1931 that Queen Rambhai Barni concurred with this remark of the king. The royal couple preferred to set themselves up as an example by living as a monogamous couple. It can be gleaned from what I have related earlier. Queen Rambhai Barni did her part in promoting women's capabilities, especially during her time in Chanthaburi and subsequently. What has begun during the seventh reign has now borne fruit in Thailand. Witness the way in which changes in social attitudes have led to the legal recognition of marriages between people of the same sex. LGBTQ rights are now celebrated during Pride Month, with parades in central Bangkok. Other changes towards real gender equality in other areas are awaited. Thus, I end my talk on the resilient Queen Rambhai Barni and her contributions in various areas. Her exemplary conduct and composure stand to be emulated by us all. By the way, Thailand has submitted to UNESCO a proposal for it to consider honoring Queen Rambhai Barni as an important personality of the world. UNESCO's decision is expected in mid-November this year. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm pleased to entertain questions, comments, and discussions from the floor. สวัสดี 4 นาทีไม่รู้40พอดี Anybody?
Hello ค่ะ นี่ค่ะ
ค่ะ
I just want to say I had the very great fortune of having known her. I find your talk very moving, and in case anyone thinks that this is the usual dribble of saying how great a royal personage is, that's so not the case here. To this day, I've met many monks that are famous and so on for being very enlightened and what have you, but I have never seen the same serenity in any religious person that I encountered in Somdet Yai, Queen Rambhai. Yeah, I'm Nuni's daughter, ค่ะ ลูกตาชินนะคะ So I met her and she was, to this day, when you said her serenity, it's almost inhuman, but it's because she went through so much. But I find it very moving, and your book is incredible, the book that you wrote about her. Thank you, Ka. Just want to say thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I note that you used the word serenity. When I wrote the Thai book on Queen Rambhai Barni, I was quite unsure as to how to put its title into English. And a cousin of mine said serene. So, I appreciate your use of the word serenity. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for your talk. May I ask about her financial situation? Was she well taken care of? Did she have to deal with any financial difficulties, or was that all right for her?
Well, King Prajadhipok left her some money and other property. So she lived on that. The farm itself didn't pay much. What actually brought in money to Suan Baan Kaew was the mat products. But when she left Chanthaburi, she made a speech that she had to leave Chanthaburi for health reasons and also questions of finance. One must realize that she had many of the the old retainers at Sukhothai Palace to look after. Sukhothai Palace was actually confiscated to become crown property. So the private palace was no longer hers. And when she came back, the palace was being used by the Ministry of Health as its headquarters. When the ministry moved out, it was repaired and she moved in. And she said she did not wish to possess it again, right? To not wish to be its owner again. She only wished to live the rest of her life there. Okay? I personally remember when I was 5 years old, her 48th birthday celebration party, garden party. I could remember it when 5 years old because I was decked up in, suit and tie and jacket and etc. I don't know whether my cousin sitting over there, Ajahn Jisnusan, remembers anything. I think he moved in about that time to Sukhothai Palace and then left a year later for England. So, in fact, she was used to frugality, even in England, and her humility served her well, in the sense that she adapted herself such that she was never blamed for anything. But at the same time, I think her humility and the way in which she did most of her contributions privately and in a provincial, in a province that was at the time considered quite far away, might have made us not quite aware of what contributions she made. She had no public relations operation for her, and she didn't make one either. Okay? Ajahn Jisnusan, my cousin and nephew of the Queen.
Well, since Prudhisan mentioned me, I can say a few words. I'm just about 6 months older than you, or almost about a year older. So my father was the younger brother of Queen Rambhai, and he went to England when I was about 6 years old, because he wanted to bring my sister to study in England, and she was about 7 years older. Anyway, we had a house in Chitlom, and he rented it out before going to England. So we went to stay at the Sukhothai Palace in the house that the next to where Her Majesty stayed. I'm not sure how proper this is, but anyway, we be open. I was 6 years old, so I was a rather naughty boy, probably. But my parents had me to walk over and have an audience with Her Majesty on occasions. And she was very kind, and when I went there, she opened a cookie jar for me. So I got the cookie, and I sold it to her for 1 baht. She gave me 1 baht for the cookie. And then I took another 2 cookies and sold it to her retainers, and they gave me 25 satang in those days. Well, I'm not sure how proper that was, but I think it shows how kind and a person she was, and how she cared for her nephews and her cousins and so on. And then perhaps addressing the question of financial a little bit. Queen Rambhai supported many of her nephews and nieces in studying abroad, including both of us on occasions. But she was not enormously rich, but she did support her funds to support us to study abroad. Okay, I think I'll stop here anyway.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay.
Prudhisan, very much for your beautiful presentation of the life of Her Majesty the Queen and her contributions to education, social development, and gender equality. I was going to use the word, it was not just a beautiful presentation, but a moving presentation, but it had already been used. So, but I would agree that it was a very moving presentation for me personally, because my grandmother was one of her ladies in waiting, and still visited Her Majesty the Queen right to the very end. So I have also visited Sukhothai Palace, and you noticed that Her Majesty was a very keen sportswoman, and she practiced golf until very late in her age. So on the lawn in front of Sukhothai Palace. So I've seen her
3-hole golf course.
Yeah,
golf course.
so seen her playing golf there. Anyway, I can testify to her frugality, because when she moved back to Sukhothai Palace, she also spent a great deal of time in Hua Hin at Pratamdak Chomdong, and it was a very frugal place. So I think once again I'd like to thank you for your beautiful presentation on behalf of the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jump in. กำลังจะยืน ทำอะไรจ๊ะถ่ายรูปหรืออะไรถ่ายรูปหรืออะไรจ๊ะ